Hello again, my name is Michael Knipp, and if you didn't already know this, I am a daddy. Yes, that's right, Amanda and I are responsible for a couple members of the next generation, whatever comes after Generation Z. And because we, like most parents, are constantly terrified about doing something that's going to screw up our children and thus screw up their lives forever and potentially screw up the entire world forever, we try to read to our children on a semi-regular basis. So in case you have children and you want to know some information about children's books, or if you're like me and you used to be a child who read children's books and you would like to see how they hold up as an adult because we try to read to our children, as I said, then hold on, because today we are going to be doing a tier list for children's books that I've been reading my children as an adult and my thoughts on them currently. As you can see over here, we have this list of tiers, which I'm going to be calling Big Brained Kid. If you read these books to your child, they will be geniuses. Pat yourself on the back, which means, hey, if you read this to your kids, you did a good thing. The It's Fine category, meaning you probably didn't screw them up, but you didn't teach them anything useful either. The Problematic category, which will probably get a lot more use today than you might think, because there's a lot of issues with children's books. And the Parental Purgatory category, which is this book exists solely to torture the parents of children who are forced to read this to their children. It's a nightmare factory. I don't know what it's going to do to your kids, but it's for sure going to mess you up. And by the time that your children are grown, you won't be okay anymore. And we're going to start it right off with the first book on this list called Are You My Mother? This is the story, just in case you don't remember, about a little bird whose mom leaves the nest to go find him some food, and then he walks to every single animal, and also, like, there's an abridged version and a non-abridged version of this book. He doesn't just stop at animals, he also talks to like a boat and a plane to ask if they're his mother. And the book mostly consists of the bird saying, "Are you my mother?" and the animals saying, "I'm not your mother, I'm a blank," whatever they are. This book is awful and it's horrible to read as a parent. And one of the things that you have to realize when you're reading children's books to children is that you have to read them over and over and over. And a book like this, even a 1-year-old child can tell that this thing is not the bird's mother. They still enjoy things because children don't have the ability to say, this is not a good book. They haven't figured that out yet. This book could just be a litmus test to show your child that this is what a bad book looks like. It's incredibly repetitive. It doesn't mean anything. And even you can understand it and you're 1 year old. Next book on this list is The Baron. I included this series, Al is one. It's The Berenstain Bears, and this book is also a parental purgatory book, because this book is the entire reason that anyone knows what the Mandela effect is. It's named the Mandela effect after Mandela, but it really has to do with this book for the majority of people that you've ever talked to, because this book is called The Berenstain Bears and not The Berenstein Bears, and I kid you not, that was not the case when we were children. Part of me wants to read this book to my children to see if the Mandela effect will continue, even if I'm aware of what's going on. Like, is this some sort of magic where if I'm aware of the magic that's happening, it doesn't work? I don't know. Don't read this book to your children just in case. I don't want every one of our children to grow up with the same conundrum that we did, where they cannot trust anything they learned as a child because their brain deceived them. Brown bear, what do you see? I think it's what it's called. There's also a polar bear, what do you hear? These books are not good. They're Eric Carle books, which is to say that they have interesting art that is slightly disturbing depending on the book. I mean, look at the cover for this one. It's more than a little bit creepy. Additionally, this is one of those incredibly repetitive books that does nothing to help your child's brain except teach them animal sounds, and it would be better to teach them animal sounds without the help of this book. It's like brown bear, what do you see? I see, and then it's another animal, and it says, animal, what do you see? And it says, I see another animal. It's not a good book. It's like flashcards, but with a lot of needless steps in the middle. The only reason I might read this book to my children is if I want them to understand the levels of needless bureaucracy that exist in the real world. Next on the list, Chicka Boom Boom. This book is all right. It's got a little bit of a rhythm to it. It's not a perfect rhythm, like it doesn't have the full Dr. Seuss quality, but it is a pretty good rhythm. Additionally, it teaches some letters and some numbering of the letters. There's fun illustrations of letters climbing on a tree. Does it make a lot of sense? No. Does your child know the difference? Also no. But it's a book that I've read to my children a bunch of times, and I don't mind it, and they enjoy it. So, I consider this one Good. If you read this one to your kid, that's a good thing. Corduroy. This is a book about a bear who's at a store. He's damaged goods, but there's a girl that comes in and decides that she wants to buy him. But before she comes back and buys him, he goes on a store adventure walking through a mall at night. Well, why is this book problematic? Well, for one, it assumes that everybody has somebody that loves them in the world. Nope, that's too mean. But this book does have a bear who runs through the store after hours and he gets in an altercation with a mall cop and he really has no negative repercussions. So, he goes back and then the girl comes and finds him and they live happily ever after. So many problems with the things that we saw in this book. Mainly that first thing, which I won't say on the channel again, but you don't want to give your kids the wrong idea about things in life. Next up on the list is Curious George. And this one's a little bit of a struggle for me because while it's also mostly fine, I think it also belongs in the problematic category. Because here's the thing, Curious George is a monkey who's very curious. I think curiosity is a very important thing to teach children. I think children who want to learn and understand things better, children that seek knowledge, is a good thing. However, the only things that Curious George does are incredibly stupid ideas that result in him doing a lot of bad things. Generally speaking, he can screw up large amounts of people's lives in the course of a single Curious George book. And does he ever really face that many consequences? Or does the man in the yellow hat show up at the end and everything turns out all right? But in reality, Curious George may have ruined the productivity of an entire hospital wing just to decorate a Christmas tree. That's what happens. So it's a book that tries to teach children, hey, be curious, explore things, but also this is the level to which you should go. You should be able to destroy public property. You should be able to run off without your parents. It's all good because in the end, your parents will come get you. You start teaching your children this from an early age, you don't know where they're going to turn up. Next up, the Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus series. Here's the thing about the Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus series. It's like, don't let the pigeon do these things. Pigeons are dumb and you shouldn't let them do these things. The art in this book, it's not good. And also the lessons that it teaches children that pigeons are not capable of human tasks is really okay. Once again, I think this is something that even a 1.5 years old child will know. Like, hey, do you think the pigeon can drive the bus? Do you think the pigeon can go perform this human task? And the answer, unless they've been watching way too much television, is probably no, they don't have hands. At the same time, it's not gonna mess your children up, probably. It's a nothing book. So even though the art annoys me because I want to just kick them back, because I want to just take a broom and sweep that pigeon away, I guess we'll put it on the it's fine category. Next up on this list, I am going to be using a representative for all flat books. Have you ever been to a child's house where there are small children who are allowed to read and be read to, and you've opened up a flat book and it has not been completely desecrated to shreds? The thing about flat books is they're made of cardboard or paper like books, and children are destructive monsters. You may love them, but they're destructive monsters. Flat books may be fun for children, but they're going to destroy the book and it won't mean anything anymore. Additionally, children figure out what's under the flap very quickly because they have an action tied to it, so it's not that valuable or exciting for them. And if you have more than one child, fighting over who gets to open the flap is the most common thing I've ever seen in my entire life. If you want to see Lord of the Flies in your own home, get a flap book and don't set rules on who's allowed to flip flaps when. Every flap book in the entire world goes under parental purgatory, and don't even get me started on pop-up books. Next up on this list, we're going to be talking about the book Fox and Socks, which is basically a Dr. Seuss rhyming book that is nothing but tongue twisters. And let me tell you, this is an enjoyable book for you to read. It's also an enjoyable book for your children to listen to, because if you really get into it and you get the rhythm down, you both work on your own inflection as well as teach your children rhyming skills and tongue twisting skills. And it's fun for you to try to read the book faster and faster. And there's lots of silly illustrations that your children can laugh at, but because of the challenge to yourself, you don't get bored reading it. You try to get a different high score every time you try to read this book, and some of the ways that they flip up those rhymes are just fire, frankly. Next on the list is Go Dog Go, and I don't know if you remember this book from when you were a kid, but here's the thing about Go Dog Go. It's all about the ending. The book Go Dog Go is It's one of the most boring and monotonous books. And I don't know if you remember this book from when you were a kid, but I remember one of the last panels in the book is you get that giant dog party at the top of that super tall tree. That party is something that I want to go to. And when I picked up this book to read to my children for the first time, that's the thing that I remembered. I'm like, oh, the dog party. This is an awesome book. The dog party is like 2 pages of the book. The rest of the book, not great. It's like one of those that tries to fit too many numbers and colors and prepositions. It's not very fun to read more than one time. And it also has the really, really rude thing where the dog is like, do you like my hat? And he's like, nah, I don't like your hat. Do you want your children to learn to respond to people like that? I feel like the fact that there are natural consequences for that negative interaction puts it on the it's fine territory. Like you can see, oh, this is not a great thing to do. Additionally, there is that last page, but it's kind of a nothing book. Now let's talk about Good Dog Carl. Here's a problem with Good Dog Carl. I don't know if you've ever seen Good Dog Carl. The thing about Good Dog Carl is that there's no words in the book of Good Dog Carl. This is one of those books that somebody thought would be a really good idea to make a bunch of pictures, and this is just pictures, and have the children sort of interpret what's going on in the story. And the pictures are cute, like it's kind of easy to figure out what's going on, so you think that it would work for children. Unfortunately, most of the time in my experience, the children won't read the book for themselves. They still want you to read it to them. So you pick up the book and you open it up, and I'm like, okay, so here's the thing, this book doesn't have words, so you can just tell me what's going on in the story. And like, no, but I want you to read it. I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what's going on. The whole purpose of this book is so that you can interpret these pictures for themselves, and I don't have to speak right now. This is a daddy has a migraine book. This probably should go into the problematic category because Good Dog Carl is about a mom who leaves a child alone with a dog for the day. The dog is the babysitter, and they get into a lot of trouble. I'm pretty sure at one point the dog pushes the baby down the laundry chute, and then we pretend like that's okay. Children are going to grow up with really unrealistic expectations for dogs, and they're going to want to do things like jump down the laundry chute, which is not as fun as it's portrayed in the book, I assume. That, in addition to its annoying nature that I already mentioned before, I'm going to put it in the problematic category, though it could probably go in either one. Goodnight Gorilla. It's probably good that these are right next to each other, so I'm going to go ahead and put this one on parental purgatory, because even though the actions of the protagonist in this book, it's about a monkey who steals the keys from a zoo night watchman and lets all the other animals out. There's no words in this book also, so it has all of the problems of the other one, but at least the protagonist is a monkey, and your children will probably not identify with, oh, it's a good idea to let a lion out of a cage so it can come and sneak into our house and lie in bed with us. But once again, your children will ask you to read this book to them, and there's nothing for you to add to this that they can't figure out from the pictures alone. I've tested this with 2-year-olds. They know the story. So that one goes under purgatory. Next up on the list is a well-known classic that's been around for years. It's called Goodnight Moon. We're going to put Goodnight Moon on the big brain kid territory. Frankly, I don't know what the deal is with Goodnight Moon, but something about it is relaxing and peaceful and also slightly mysterious and creepy in a way that works for me. I think it's cool. If you want to creep your kids out a little bit so they know that the world is a little bit scary, then just open up the page and show them that there's a Goodnight Nobody page and have them think about the implications of there may be invisible things out there that they're saying goodnight to. Have them ponder the sentience of nothing or the fact that something could be there that they don't see. Have them say goodnight to the things that lurk beyond. This may instill in your children the seed of what it takes for them to start their quest to understand the existence and nature of the elder gods, but frankly, knowing is half the battle. Next up on the list is the book Green Eggs and Ham, one of the biggest well-known classics along with Goodnight Moon. One of the amazing things about Green Eggs and Ham is that it teaches your children to not be picky eaters and to try new things, because if you've never tried something before, you don't know if it's going to be a problem. It also is something that says, hey, just because this is a different color doesn't mean it's really that different. The prose style of the book is a sort of repetitive prose that reminds me of The Hole Under the Bottom of the Sea song, where it sort of adds to itself as it goes, but in an interesting way where once again, you can challenge both your memory and your recitation skills to see if you can level up and get to that next level of reciting Green Eggs and Ham. And if you can recite it all from memory, accurately, even with the little fill twists that there are between the different pages and lines, then you, my friend, are an ace parent, and your child will probably want you to make green eggs at some point in their life. Ironically, if you make your child green eggs by putting food coloring in regular eggs, it generally looks disgusting enough that you may not want to eat it, which sort of goes against the message you just taught your child. The next book we're going to be talking about is Hand, Fingers, Thumb. I'm not sure if you've heard of this one. It may be slightly less common, but this one's about a monkey who learns rhythm. Basically, the thing that happens in this book is there's a monkey and he says like hand, fingers, thumb, dum diddy bum bum bum. And if you have to read to your little brother to go to sleep like I did, you can learn how to rap to it. There are some awesome illustrations in this, including one page that is just a bazillion monkeys all marching towards the same destination playing drums. It's a little bit wild and also a little bit inspiring. So I'm going to go ahead and move that up to Big Brain Kid. If You Give a Mouse a Cookie is sort of a story about teaching children the consequences of their own actions. And this one actually is a little bit cyclical, which could help reinforce in them both the mundanity of life as well as the nonsensical nature of the world that we live in. I'm going to put this one under pat yourself on the back. If you read this book to your children, they'll start understanding the line of trees of consequences. If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want milk to go with it. If you give him milk to go with it, he's going to want X. If you give him X, he's going to want Y. Additionally, if you wanted to, there's probably something about that like Confucius saying about teaching a man to fish or something. But I'm pretty sure at some point in the transaction list at this book, the mouse cleans up the entire house for the host, in which case, maybe it's not that bad to give a mouse a cookie if he's going to clean up everything in the house for you and also make you signed original art. If I had a mouse that would make me signed original art and clean my house, I would in fact give him a cookie. So maybe it's not as bad as I thought to give a mouse a cookie. Let's talk about iSpy. Now, iSpy books are interesting. They're kind of like the Where's Waldo, but they have like actual regular things in them, in which case there will be pages. I don't know why I'm explaining this, but maybe you've never seen an iSpy book. In the page, there will be pictures of lots of items, and then you have to search for the items that are on the list. If your children are young enough that you have to do an iSpy book with them, they can't understand to just search for the things in the search for list. The odds of them being able to find all of the things in anything more than the most basic of iSpy books when they're small is pretty low. By the time that they're smart enough to be able to do this activity on a regular basis, they can teach the books to themselves and you shouldn't have to read it to them. But here's maybe the biggest problem. Kids are smart, especially with repetition. Once you've read this book to your child who's too small to be able to find these things in the first place, like twice, they'll just memorize where all the items are, and it's no fun for them anymore. It's no fun for you anymore because you know, there's like 10 items on the page. The iSpy books, in theory, are like an awesome idea that teaches your child something, but like I said, if they can't figure it out with some very basic minor direction, they're too young for the dang book. Next up on the list is Llama Llama Red Pajama, and the thing about Llama Llama Red Pajama is it's perfectly wonderful. It's about a child. The child will make mistakes. The parents explain the mistakes and the child gets better. It's also a wonderful adaptation on Netflix, starring Jennifer Garner of Alias fame, but like more wholesome and mom-ish, like more like a mom. Like less Sydney Bristow and more Capital One commercial. I'm pretty sure this book is available at most libraries. You should pick it up and read it to your children when they're young, and I think that you can give yourself a pat on the back. Now, this one's gonna be a tough one. It's called Love You Forever, and it has this little boy sitting next to the toilet on it. And this one goes somewhere between Big Brained Kid and Parental Purgatory. And let me explain it to you. It's the story about how a mom has a little boy and she says that she's going to love him forever. And she sings this song that's like, I love you forever. I'll like you for always. As long as you're living, my baby you'll be. I don't know if you can tell that I'm already cracking up. And spoilers for this children's board book, but by the end of the book, the mother is old and dying and the daddy is holding the mom. The daddy is holding the mom and he sings the song back to her. It's this wonderful, beautiful story about growing up from babyhood to adulthood and the loving relationship between parents and their children. And every flipping time I have to read this book to my children, I break down in tears because it's so flipping emotional. And your children don't freaking get it. Like when I was a kid and I had to listen to this book with my mom, I didn't get why she cried every time she read this book. It's a beautiful life lesson and metaphor. It's so wonderful, but at the same time, why do you have a children's book that makes you cry every freaking time you read it to your 2-year-old? They don't know what's going on. Frick, I don't want to cry in this stupid video. Next up is Mike Mulligan's Steam Shovel. Now, I think that the purpose of this book is to teach children about gentrification, but it does it in an odd way by personifying the methods that we used to create old things. So it's kind of like a book that teaches us to respect things from the past, but instead of respecting the actual thing as much, it's kind of about respecting the tools that we used to make the thing. So instead of being like, hey, the music back in the 80s is better than all the music we make now, it's like, hey, the equipment we used to make music back in the 80s that wasn't as good, it just really wasn't as good. It has a heart and a soul, and it's a person. And if you don't use it, it basically dies. So if you're not making modern music with things from the 80s, that thing died and it's your fault. Is it sort of heartwarming? on some level. But when you actually think about it, the message that it teaches are all muddied, I think. Oh, the places you'll go. All right, now let's talk about this book before I put it in its correct category. Oh, the Places You'll Go is probably a book that you've heard quoted at a graduation. In fact, it's probably a book you've heard quoted at every graduation. In fact, it's probably a book you've heard quoted at every graduation by every third student graduating. Oh, the Places You'll Go, you'll likely have like 2 lines from this book memorized, and you will hate it, and you will think that this book is absolute trash and such garbage, and you'll wonder why children that are going into college all think that this book is so inspirational. I have no idea if they've read it, but they all choose the same freaking quotes. I had never read Oh, the Places You'll Go until last year, and I went in expecting it to be some hot garbage. But here's the truth about Oh, the Places You'll Go. As annoying as the graduating high school students are, who think that they've graduated from one institutional ladder to become the bottom rung of the next institutional ladder, while they're spending time in higher education, spending way too much money for a degree that may not be able to pay itself off. And you'll say, why the frick are you quoting a Dr. Seuss child's book when you're going to college? And you'll think that's incredibly stupid. I still don't know if it actually is. The thing is, why do they always quote the same things? Dang it, if you read this book, it's actually quite good. It's warm and fuzzy. It's good. So we're gonna put this under Big Brain Kid, because yeah, it's annoying, but it's a good annoying. Okay, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. Not only is that kind of an annoying title, and it's easy to mistake what the numbers and the colors go to, it's also an awful book to have to read to your children over and over and over, because it really just is sort of that. It's kind of like Go Dog Go without the awesome dog party. Owl Babies. It's a board book about owls who their mom leaves to go get them food, and they have to wait on her to come back, and they're confused. Actually, that kind of sounds like Are You My Mother? Only unlike Are You My Mother, it's slightly less repetitive. There's 3 different owls, and they sort of play off each other, like an older owl, a medium owl, and a baby owl, but one of them is smart enough to know that they should wait on their mother. It's fine. Now let's talk about this person. So this person is Sandra Boynton. I don't know if you've read Sandra Boynton. I don't know if Sandra Boynton books existed when I was a child, but they exist now for my children, and they are wonderfully delightful little children's books. Every single one of the Sandra Boynton's books, they're written in rhyme, and they're written very cutely, and all of them are catchy, and the illustrations are adorable. They're all these animals doing silly things. Sandra Boynton is the master of children's board books, in my opinion, and if you ever see one and you have a child, you should buy one for that child. That's the thing that happens when you have adult money. With great power comes great responsibility. If you don't buy a Sandra Boynton book for the small child in your life, you are doing them a disservice, and that's on you. Now let's talk about the rainbow fish. I'm gonna put it here while I talk about it. This is the first time that your child will likely be exposed to holographic technology, the same technology that might be used in trading cards if your child happens to be interested in that as they grow. And it's really cool the way that the light can reflect these rainbow scales on this rainbow fish. But there is a warning, and I don't want to get too political in this children's book video about children's books, but this book basically teaches communism. And depending on how you feel about communism, you may or may not want to read this book to your children. Next up is The Very Hungry Caterpillar. We're gonna say this is a pat yourself on the back book. This book teaches about the dangers of overeating. It also exposes them to lots of different fruits and tells them that caterpillars should mostly eat leaves. The art's kind of fun, and I like the fact that this is a board book that has pages that are not all symmetrical. Like, you have the different size pages with the different holes. Also, if you have little kids, they like to stick their fingers in the holes of the book. They're not small enough that they can get stuck. At least they weren't for my children. It's a fun little children's book, and it teaches them about the dangers of eating too many sweets. A lesson that maybe some of us adults could be reminded of. Cat in the Hat is this book that's like a monolith. It's kind of the thing. Like, Dr. Seuss's logo is the cat and the hat. The problem with this book is that it's about the children letting in a stranger who then wrecks their house, cleans it up, and says, it's all good. Maybe you shouldn't tell your parents. I guess he doesn't say that, but the book ponders the question, would you tell your parents if this happened? That's not okay to teach your children. Like, yeah, I would want my children to tell me if a cat came into the house and they let a stranger in the house, they destroyed everything, broke the sanctity of all of our possessions, put them back as if nothing happened, and then left before I came home. Yes, I would want my children to tell me about that. So I guess you could use it as an object lesson. Also, as a child, I'm not gonna lie. Thing 1 and Thing 2, they terrified me. Speaking of things that terrified me, there's a walk-it in my pocket. But fortunately, this book is awesome. Not only is this another book that could be turned into a rap, as you may have seen in that one viral video where the guy raps this one is another book that expands children's imaginations to greater heights as they can imagine that there's different monsters in their house that do different things. Unfortunately, some of those monsters are terrifying, but our imaginations are frequently filled with nightmares. The rhymes are fun. Children realize that other people make up words just the same way that they do. I'll say it again, there's that one viral rap, and it slaps. Next up is
Guess How Much I Love You,
which I'm going to put under Pat Yourself on the Back. There's some annoying things about this book. Basically, it's a book about a dad bunny and a son bunny, maybe daughter bunny, and they get in a one-upping contest about who loves the other one more. It's really an unfair contest because the daddy is a dad bunny and the child is a child bunny. The dad has a dad brain and dad skills, and the child is a child with a child brain and child skills. Nevertheless, its final phrase of "I love you to the moon and back," it's such a wonderful phrase. It's a phrase that's common in our household. I find it to be a delightful story to try to show your children that you love them more than they could ever possibly understand. And finally, Where the Wild Things Are. This is potentially one of the most disturbingly visual books that you could give your children, because Where the Wild Things Are is about a boy who will not eat his supper. He gets sent up to his room and he escapes to a land full of monsters, and those monsters will mess your children up. But it is also another perfect book for teaching your children the power of imagination. If you're the type of little nerd that I was as a little boy, when you read this book, you start to wonder why the monsters are all different. What are the different abilities that these monsters could have? Yes, they are terrifying, but they're beautiful in a dark way. You can use your imagination to imagine things that are not just perfect and happy and exactly how you want them to be. You can imagine complex worlds. It also reinforces that if you're a bad kid, your parents won't feed you. So sometimes you need to escape to a Monsterland so you can pretend that you have any control over your life at all. And that is the end of my children's book tier. Do you have any thoughts on what I put here? Did I miss any major books? I think that I found all of the books that were worth mentioning, but if I did not talk about one of your favorite books, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll tell you where it belongs. If you have a problem with any of the things that I said in this tier list, feel free to correct me in the comments down below. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up on it. If you'd like to see more videos where I talk about books, you can subscribe to this channel. This is a little bit more goofy than the stuff I generally do, but it was a lot of fun. If you'd like to talk about any of these choices with me more, there's a link down below to a Discord that you can join. There's a bunch of people there. I think that this video might generate some fun discussion over there. If you'd like to support this channel financially, there's also a link down below to both a Patreon and also a merch store where you could buy a shirt like this, as well as a couple other different shirts. I love each and every one of you so very much. I hope to see you again. Until next time, goodbye.
No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired, sleep. No one ever get enough. If it don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired, sleep. No one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.